Content warning. Due to the theme of exploring trauma, Paradox Live contains some themes that may be uncomfortable or unsuitable for some viewers. More details are available in the video description below. Hey there, heads. Welcome back. I have been going back and forth for almost a year now, trying to figure out how I wanted to write this script to talk about Paradox Live Road to Legend. And I feel like I have written and rewritten and torn apart and restructured this whole script like 50 times to the point that it's become just this whole momentous task in my head that I just don't want to even engage with. So I finally just decided to try and speak off the cuff, no script, just kind of give you my thoughts. I'm going to do my best to walk through all of the events that happen more or less in this general summary of the Road to Legend season, so to speak. And I'll probably cut up this audio a little bit, clean it up, cut out if I go on tangents too much. This is going to be also colored with some of my own personal opinions and my own thoughts on the events of the story. I always welcome discussion in the comments. If you think I didn't do something justice, or if you feel that I kind of breezed over a really important bit of the narrative, definitely comment below. I love to talk to you guys about this. This is still one of my big special interests after, 5 years that I've been actively taking part in this fandom. So, absolutely feel free to speak to me on this because I love to have these discussions. If you're new here, Paradox Live is a multimedia project. I talk a lot about the first season and the events and the characters and things on my channel already, so I would highly recommend you check out those other videos before you get to this. We're talking here about Season 2, and in my opinion, why it was kind of a whole train wreck dumpster fire. But that's my personal opinion. Let's get into it. So in November of 2021, that's the second anniversary of Paradox Live, which, again, insane, actually, to think about at this point. The project announced 4 more teams, and it was like a huge big deal, right? And so everyone is now writing off of the first Paradox Live season. I guess we're calling them seasons now. So after that first season of Paradox Live, which I have to say had really good writing, it had really good character moments, it had these fantastic interactions, and different teams that had these complex histories that connected them with the other groups and such. Everyone's excited, right? Oh my god, we get these 4 new teams. So they drop the teams. You have Visti, Amp Rule, Inmate, and Gokuduck. And by March of the next year, so March 2022, Paradox Live, the opening show for the Road to Legend, dropped. And I think one of the things... Okay, well, let's get first to the meat and potatoes. What actually was happening in this album? So in the Visti short, we get a little bit of Visti. They're interacting. They're on a stream, like a live stream for their remaining audience. We immediately get the sense they're telling us we used to have so many more people who would tune into our lives, but ever since Kay left, we've been really kind of up shit creek. Our numbers are really dropping off, and it's been really hard for us to kind of maintain relevance. You have Kantaro, who's like this chronic ego surfer, as Aoi calls him. Like, he's just constantly checking his social media and his likes and his like statistical data. He's checking on who's like watching him, right? You have Shogo, who, when his father, this like very successful and famous, well-known actor, is mentioned, just kind of really has this horrible kind of panic attack reaction, and he starts vomiting. He gets very nauseous and unwell because of his anxiety about being perceived as a nepo baby, so like somebody who has been chosen through nepotism, especially in the media. In this case, in the media sphere, he is the son of this very famous person, so people assume that he has his position as the leader of this idol group purely because of his father's connections. You have Toma. I feel like Toma gets to shine a little bit because he is a very nurturing and like kind of upbeat character in this moment. He kind of shows that he's kind of the glue, the emotional glue that's holding Visti together and trying to keep everyone's spirits high and stuff. And Aoi is sort of there. I would say, I feel like Aoi is very understated a lot of times. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that because of just the general, I don't know, trajectory of Visti's development, a lot of times Aoi gets completely left by the wayside, or sort of just kind of like, here's Aoi, and then that's it. But I think they make a pretty decent impression. I found them very endearing. I think there's something very charming about an idol group that's desperately trying not to fail. Like, I love Zombieland Saga, and I feel like they kind of gave me a little bit of that vibe where they're, like, they almost seem a little bit out of touch, but they're really trying their best. One thing I would say, though, about the Visti drama is that Shogo is vomiting, like, through a lot of it. And so he's making, like, vomiting noises, and so if you're not cool with that, it is kind of a lot to listen to, and even as somebody who's not necessarily the most sensitive to that, it was a lot to listen to. So then you have Amp Rule, which is, in my opinion, also kind of a hard drama to listen to. In Amp Rule's introduction drama, you have Chung Sung, the butler, driving Dong-ha, Ha-jun's little brother. They're driving around, and at some point, Dong-ha is kicking the back seat, Chung Sung's back seat, because he's upset about something that Chung Sung has said. I want to say it. Chung Sung is talking about how they did get into this Road to Legend competition, but they will have a lot of stiff competition because, for example, Bae and some of these other groups already have an established fan base, and so Dong-ha and Amp Rule as a whole are going to be trying to kind of break into the scene. So Dong-ha being upset vents by yelling at Chung Sung and kicking the back of his seat because he's 14 and kind of comes across as a brat very much, but it's kind of understandable how he gets that way because look at his older brother, and then you think about kind of the family environment he's been raised in. The problem with why the drama becomes very uncomfortable relatively quickly, in my opinion, is that Chung Sung he has this kind of masochist persona where now, in the light of the recent Amp Rule memory light novel that's come out, or the short story rather, we understand that Chung Sung has kind of externalized his trauma, and so he feels that when he's being punished by a member of the Yon family, he is actually doing them a service because it's in the service to their better mental well-being and their happiness and success. And so he kind of takes this, and when Dong-ha is treating him like this, he's very pleased by it. But he also kind of like moans a lot during that, and a lot of people find that kind of uncomfortable. Anyway, Chung Sung has taken it upon himself. Dong-ha told him that he needed a new bell because while they're in Japan for the competition, they have rented this like mansion space, basically, and Dong-ha wants a bell so that he can like ring it and summon Chung Sung to come help him. And Chung Sung has purchased 2 bells, actually. One of them is made from this like world-renowned bell craftsman, and, you know, people all over the world know this name, and he, you know, obviously he has a beautiful product. And then the other bell is from a like new craftsman who also uses really high quality materials and clearly has a lot of potential, but he's just really not that well known yet. And Chung Sung is clearly trying to give Dong-ha this like metaphor for Bae versus Amp Rule, but Dong-ha's like fed up with his BS, and so Dong-ha just takes the bells and beats him with it. And so then, yeah, a lot of the last part of that drama is just him wailing on Chung Sung with a bell, which again, Chung Sung's moaning, it's kind of uncomfortable. I feel like Dong-ha, like, it's hard because this first drama really does paint Dong-ha in an incredibly bad light. Like, you sit there and go, oh my god, this child is totally out of control. He's a little prick. He's beating his servants, basically, you know, and he has this, like, really out of control ego. I think from, like, you know, a meta perspective, you also look at it and go, okay, well, yeah, he's, you know, 14 years old. He's probably grown up being told he's the greatest thing ever, you know, and he's clearly overcompensating for the fact that Ha-jun is highly competent and capable at what he does, and he's been constantly, compared to him growing up. But anyway, I digress. You get to Inmate's drama. Inmate has kind of a cute little family dynamic, like kind of a found family dynamic. It's really 2/3 a family and then 1/3 found family, I guess, if you really want to get down to it. Kei used to be the kind of leader of the idol group Visti, but he left suddenly and he didn't really explain why, leaving all of his teammates in the aforementioned kind of struggle that they've been in. But really what he was doing was trying to find his younger brother who had gone mysteriously missing. It turned out, though, that his younger brother had been actually taken from the orphanage that he was in and used as a test subject by Alter Trigger regarding the effects of phantom metal on people. However, after the events in like the live drama, there's a little bit of just kind of a passing comment about how something had happened and Alter Trigger's company folded, basically, and all these people who were test subjects were released. And that's how Itsuki and Rokuta are released into the public. If you were unaware of, like, Japanese numbers and how they're written and read, Rokuta comes from, like, the number 6 Roku, and Itsuki comes from the Japanese number for 5, which can be read Itsu, so it's kind of a reference to the fact that they're numbered as number 5 and 6, respectively. And Kei kind of plays into this because their MC names are numbers, so there's 5, 6, and 7. And, however, like, Rokuta also has, like, his name that he had before, which is Minori. And so Kei refers to him as this, but Rokuta has actually lost a lot of his memories about that time before being a test subject, and so he doesn't actually remember Kei very well. And so he personally kind of feels that Itsuki is more of his big brother than Kei is, and it's kind of a slight conflict, but also kind of not, because Kei is just sort of accepted that Itsuki is part of their family now. Oh my god, my Tamagotchi. So in this little family unit that they've made, comprised of Kei, Itsuki, and Rokuta, Kei has decided that he will kind of lead them on this holy crusade to convince the public that phantom metal is not worth it and phantom live should just stop because it's like killing people, and also because it's been built upon this very obviously immoral human experimentation to some extent. And I think that maybe that's partially why oh my god. So I don't think Inmate was necessarily the most welcome right off the bat, especially after all of these people, we've had this whole year so far in season of characters kind of really going, hey, I'm going to put my life on the line because my music and my message and whatever means that much to me, etc., etc. And then, of course, the wildest is that their first matchup is with the Cat's Whiskers, who, of all of the groups, probably have some of the most tangible reasons to be anti-Phantom Metal, and yet the Phantom Metal is so viscerally important to Simon and Yohei because of the music it allows them to make and the way that they connect to people through their music, and in a way to Tsubaki through that. It makes it so that they are absolutely opposed to agreeing to quit Phantom Metal forever. But that's, again, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So in this first drama, Inmate just gets together. They have a meal together. Rokuta is endearing. He, is a little bit childish comparatively. Itsuki, technically roughly the same age, but a lot more mature. He appears mature because he is very stoic. Because of how the Phantom Metal has affected Itsuki's memory, he finds that it benefits him to kind of shut down his emotion and not feel as much, because then it is easier to kind of encounter daily interactions and things without this extra added baggage. However, being with Kei and Rokuta is starting to help ease that reluctance to engage with the human part of himself, and he's starting to kind of feel this warmth again. Meanwhile, Kei is really devoted to this cause because of the pain and suffering that he sees that both Itsuki and his brother encountered. And so he is trying to use his music to really reach out to the world and inform them about the kind of human price of the Phantom Life, which I don't think is necessarily a bad message. It feels a little bit relevant in the sense that in our modern consumerist society that we have to kind of accept on some level that there is going to be almost inevitably some level of human exploitation and cruelty that is present in almost every product that we consume or every product that we obtain. And it sucks to acknowledge that, but I do feel like on some level I feel like there's a little bit of commentary possible there. But it also is not maybe I'm like way over analyzing this and reading way too far into it when it's really not that deep. It is literally just a media project. But I don't know. And then finally we have Goku Luck, which I like Goku Luck. I think they're interesting, and I like Kenta because he's like an edgy 15-year-old off of 4chan. I feel like if I had interacted with Kenta when I was 15, I would have vibed with him. Like, you know, not to say I was on 4chan, but you know, being edgy on the internet in like the early 2010s, it had a certain feel to it. You know, that being said, I do have like a tiny bit of resentment in the writing handling Goku Duck because of the way that some of their writing inherently retconned some of the established lore of Akan Yatsura. And so I'm a little bit salty about it. Like, for example, Ryoga is the guy, right? He's the reason that Satsuki initially went to juvie. But back initially it said that Satsuki's trauma was that he was betrayed by a friend. And then, you know, later on we find out that actually he was helping Ryoga by covering for him, so he took a fall for Ryoga. So there's not actually betrayal, it's just that he took a fall for him, which is like, it kind of takes a little bit of the weight away, I guess, in that sense, because it's not as harsh that he was really betrayed in that sense. It's just that he took a fall for someone and had to go to juvie. If anything, then the trauma would probably really be the fact that his parents packed up their house and left when he was in juvie, so by the time he got home, no one was there, which is insane. But anyway, I digress. Yudo and Hansho are kind of a poor representation of DID, dissociative identity disorder. It's very cartoon, Jekyll and Hyde situation, you know. I'm sure many people have made that commentary before, and probably with more information and awareness than I have. But I have to say it, otherwise someone will comment that I didn't. I think it's, like, narratively it's fine. It's kind of funny at this point, honestly, in, like, the sense that Hansho's the one who performs all the music, so Yudo just shows up to the venue, and then Hansho comes out and performs, and then goes back, I guess. I don't know. Maybe the message here, or the concept here, is that he's able to healthily channel his aggression and rage through Hansho and the production of music, I guess, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, we find out in their little intro drama that they have been granted special permission from the prison, in which Ryoga, Shion, and Kenta are the top rappers. So apparently in this prison, the prisoners all do battle rapping, and the ones who are the best at it are like prison royalty. And so these three guys are the top of the rap game in the prison. And so all the other prisoners really respect them and give them stuff, and they get special privileges. Like Kenta gets a laptop, which, given that he's a hacker and apparently created a virus that almost destroyed everything or whatever, seems highly irresponsible, but what do I know? You know, anyway, they get special privileges and stuff, and Yudo manages to kind of use this dynamic within the prison to convince the prison officials to allow this group to compete in the Paradox Live competition. And he does manage to get them to do that. And he is hoping for the prisoners to have something to fight for and something that they can like channel their creative energy into, and that's like productive to society as a whole, and to help their rehabilitation. Ryoga just likes being able to rap, I guess, and potentially get more food. Shion is glad to be out of the prison because he likes to sneak out of the prison anyway. And Kenta's kind of salty about it because it doesn't matter. He's on special, like, imprisonment and he can't get out anyway. That's basically the wrap up of all of their introductions, in kind of a quick roundabout way. Granted, I've given you a little bit of extra information here. Like, we become privy to this information later on, but I digress again. It's more or less what we know at the time. We also know, basically, from the introduction on the opening Buraikan ramble, that basically Haruomi is holding this event in the hopes that they can find the next generation of Paradox Live performers to kind of carry on the legacy left by Chise and himself, Budaikan as a whole. And he is having this whole conversation to the phantom illusion that he's created of Chise in their beautiful, newly renovated Club Paradox, courtesy of Suiseki Gumi's affiliate construction company. I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that, quite frankly, this entire season of Paradox Live, in my opinion, was doomed from the start, because the battle structure is actually kind of a nightmare. When we first got our look at it, I want to say, again, about in March of 2022, shortly before the album dropped officially, we got our look at this bracket system, and I want you to take a look at it and think for 2 seconds without knowing the outcomes. I'm sure many of you already do, but if you don't know what the outcomes of this particular season of Paradox Live was, I want you to think about the fact that 4 of the groups on this bracket have already an established fan base of at least about a year or so, and that 4 of them are brand new, and we just met them. And I want you to think for 2 seconds about how you think the battles will go, regardless, sight unseen, not listening to any music at all. And you would be correct, because every single original, first-gen unit in this battle structure won immediately. And, I feel like half of me wants to think, from a narrative standpoint, I think it makes sense, right? It's a nice way to immediately kind of humble these new groups and go, oh my god, there's a real deal, we gotta really buckle in and try. But that being said, I feel like we could have maybe had a little bit of, a lead-up. Maybe we have the first round of battling amongst themselves, and then after they've kind of battled amongst themselves in the new groups, they then come in and battle the old groups. And I know that probably part of the risk of that is that then you have none of the original groups that people like, so then people are probably thinking, why am I going to buy this album if it doesn't have any of the groups I like on it, right? So, it is a little bit of a rock and a hard place, right? But that being said, I also feel like a lot of the matchups here are immediately, they're like giving away the plot too soon, okay? So, for example, in the Fate stage battle, you have Ha-jun in Bay up against his little brother Dongha in Amp Rule. I feel like that's like the third stage battle matchup, right? That's not your first, here we go, top of the batting order, we're going right into it. It felt a little bit fast for that. And shockingly also, after the introduction drama, that makes Dongha just looks like the worst brat imaginable, and his weird moaning butler who's just getting his backside handed to him. Shockingly, they lost to Bay, the second most popular group as of the last season of Paradox Live. Hello, editing Tenkei here. I completely forgot to talk about what Bay and Amprul actually did in their drama. Amprul invites them over to the mansion where they're staying, and Dongha has Chung-sung give them, as in Alan and Anne specifically, a whole test about how well they know Ha-jun, and in doing so, he tries to prove that Ha-jun's friends are not very good friends because they don't know these really weird, arbitrary things about him, like which foot he puts in his shoe first in the morning. And the whole point really ultimately demonstrates the fact that Dongha has no actual understanding of what friends are, and his only basis for understanding how people can be close to you and around you and care for you are kind of like your servants or butler in this case. So that's pretty much the whole premise of that drama. The Bay does their whole Bay thing. They're like, hey, we love Ha-jun. He's our friend, even if he's kind of a jerk. And they go home. And then Dongha asks Chongsung to bring him a candy apple, which is his favorite food, even though it's sort of seen as this kind of peasant, commoner dish from Chongsung's perspective. And then you have Inmate versus the Cat's Whiskers, wherein Inmate rolls into Bar 7-4 after all of the emotion and the sorrow and like the exploring the tragedy of the loss of Tsubaki, Simon's wife, and Yohei's, one-sided love interest, and kind of Shiki with his experiences with Nayuta and Phantom Metal Erosion and all these other things. Inmate rolls in and goes, hey, so first off, we know Ryu because he also was a human experiment. Second, you need to quit Phantom Live immediately because it's bad for us. Like, I feel like I think it makes sense because I don't know. Kay has kind of that, like, he seems like maybe not the best at social cues, if you know what I mean. And so I get that he would be the kind of guy who would just say that, but it does feel very tone deaf. And so even if you don't feel particularly strongly about the Cat's Whiskers as a group, you do sit there and go, huh, that's kind of crazy for a bunch of teenagers to just roll up to these grown adult men and say, you guys need to knock that off. Like, they're like, we've been doing Phantom Live almost longer than you've been alive. That's a slight exaggeration, but you get my point. They also beat Inmate because why? Why would they not? And again, Ryu being, that human experiment and also meeting up with Itsuki and Rokuta, who he kind of vaguely doesn't recall. Like, he seems like maybe he remembers something, but it's not all there, right? They know him because they remember him as Experiment Zero. So, that's a whole thing. Anyway, it does also open up the door to some more lore later on, but we'll talk about that in a second. Next, you get the Rage drama that matches up Goku Luck and Akanyatsura So Awesome. We're going to get all of that, retcon trauma right off the bat. And Cosmos and Visti, because those are the last two groups left. Anyway, I'm incredibly biased, so I can't say a lot bad about the Akanyatsura and Goku Duck Rage drama because, as I said, I'm incredibly biased. But that being said, we do explore a little bit about Satsuki's past trauma with Ryoga. And, like, on one hand, I think because they rewrote it where he isn't technically betrayed, he just took the fall for Ryoga, and now he feels betrayed about it because Ryoga's back in prison. It feels a little bit like a cop-out. And I think that also, too, like, they were both kind of young at the time. I think Ryoga was, like, 18 at the time, which is why Satsuki went instead, because he would go to juvie, and Ryoga would have gone to prison. But also, I feel like you could have had a moment where, yeah, Ryoga did betray him at the time because he didn't want to go to prison. Like, I think that you could have recovered from that. Like, we would have still grown to like a character who made a rash and, like, poor and selfish decision at that time. And I think that, like, not doing that is a little bit of a sellout. Or not a sellout, rather. It's kind of just, it's a cop-out, is the word I'm looking for. But, I some people feel like Satsuki got over his trauma really fast, though, with Ryoga. With that being said, I feel like that seems on par for him. He seems like the kind of guy who gets really heated really fast, gets worked up, and then, like, kind of cools off really fast as well. So I feel like that's kind of on track for him. Then you also get a little bit of Yudo with his, he's having bad dreams that seem like memories of something, but he doesn't actually remember because he does not remember things that Hancho does. Hancho being his alter ego. And he is recalling, like, basically beating the absolute bejesus out of somebody, but he doesn't really remember the details, but he knows that it was someone who's really important to him, and he feels incredibly guilty and sad about it. We find out also that it was Zen. He beat the crap out of Zen because Zen was leaving the police force to go join the Yakuza. And, previously Yudo had considered him a very close friend. Basically, Hancho views this as, like, ultimate betrayal, and he tries to kill Zen for it. Which is why Zen is now terrified of Yudo / Hancho. And Iori recognizes this, and I think it's really fascinating because you find out through the conversation that Iori and Zen have that Zen has actually never told Iori who almost beat him to death. He just refused to tell him, which is fascinating because Zen's a bad liar anyway. And Iori kind of just accepted that because he didn't want to, like, pry into Zen's personal trauma. But he does reassure Zen, though, that no one will ever put a hand on him again. And they have this very beautiful moment talking together in the, like, little garden courtyard of their Japanese home. So, again, as I said, I'm incredibly biased about it. I feel a lot of emotions. I'm very excited to see it in the Paradox Live stage. Anyway, with Cosmez and Visti, Visti's just scared because they're already unpopular, and then they're going to go up against Cosmez, who are undefeated the champions. They're the champions of the previous Paradox Live season, and now Visti is very scared about it. Cosmez are like, idols are stupid. You guys are all fake nice, and that's it. It's just, you guys are fake nice, you're fake musicians, you just do this produced BS and pretend to be all happy and shiny, but life isn't like that. Life sucks, and we're going to talk about how much life sucks because we have lived that life. And then by the end, Visti's kind of like, yeah, you guys are really good at music, and Cosmez is like, you know what, you guys are also not terrible at music. And that's pretty much it, because there was not really any substance to that. Which leads me kind of to one of the big criticisms of the second gen of characters. So a lot of people really kind of felt that there aren't a lot of connections between the members of the groups in the second gen or with the members of the groups in the second gen with the previous generation, right? You have some limited connections. You have, like, obviously Dongha and Hajun. You have Itsuki and Rokuta with Ryu. You have Yudo and Hancho with Zen. You have Ryoga and Satsuki. And that's it. I guess, like, technically I forgot. Oh my god. And then in Visti, Aoi also really admires Anne because Aoi is trans. It's, like, not really subtle. They never technically outright say it, but all of the clues are there, okay? Aoi really respects Anne. Aoi really dislikes medical examinations. Their trauma's about being, like, born wrong. They're, and apologizing to their mother about being born wrong. Their Phantom Metal item is butterfly themed. I don't know how else to tell you that Aoi is trans. But all those things being said, it just feels very empty and void of connections. Whereas, I'll put the chart up here. Let's take a look at the connections that were given to us between the original four groups at the start of the series. Granted, you'll notice that some of the big connections are not there. For example, there's no connection between Shiki and Nayuta, because, there was that whole... The Nayuta at the start of the series is not the Nayuta who has a connection to Shiki, right? You do already have the connection that, for example, Simon is a professor at the university where the Bay guys study. You have the connection between Hokusai and Ryu, which I somehow forgot earlier, but Hokusai and Ryu are, they're walking buddies. They wander around the town a lot together. You have that Satsuki has a huge crush on Anne from Bay. We have that Iori is employing Kanata to go run dirty jobs. We have even a connection from Shiki that he's kind of intimidated by Kanata. There are sort of these connections, and then very quickly into the series, introduction dramas, we have established that Anne works at Club Candy, run by Iori, and Zen works there with Satsuki as well. You have things like that Iori knows Yohei from the old days. You have things like the Akanyatsura kids know Shiki from school. They have all of these other little details that are kind of revealed to us very quickly. And that's just within these 4 units, right? Whereas alternatively, now we've had, at this point, when I'm making the video, we've had now 2 seasons basically with these groups, and there's still not really that many connections between them. And it just feels very, very void and lacking, especially again in a series that has previously done so well in playing out all of these intricate connections and underlying, relationships between characters. Even the connections within Gen 2 to other characters within Gen 2 are incredibly small and minor. I mean, I guess the major one is Visti and Kay, right? Literally none of them have any other connections because they were chosen at random, basically. Look, technically not at random. They went through like an audition process to be in the Paradox Live competition, and Haruomi chose them. And so they don't really have a lot of connections to each other, and they also have minimal connections to the existing units, but I would argue that's one of the strengths of early Paradox Live, in that we don't have to do all this extra stuff to now come up with interactions that they have with each other, because we already have a background of interactions with each other. And so one of the hard things, the hurdles that this season had, the Road to Legend had, was they had to now both establish new characters and also establish interactions between the new characters and the world that they occupied. All right. So, to no one's surprise, though, all of the new units lost because nobody knows anything about them. We have one introduction and now an additional stage battle to go off of. They immediately go to the bottom of this whole thing, and now it's all of them versus each other so that one can compete in the later part of the competition. So now they are like literally just SOL, if you will, and they don't have any good chance. Like, there is in no way will we get any more songs from all of those new units, which again is immediately locking us out of further interactions with them or between them and the existing units, right? So like half of me wants to go, oh, maybe it was like planned so that like they would all have that loss and now they all have something to prove. But then you sit there and go, but wait a second, they still, like, because of the way it's structured, only one of them is going to be able to continue, so they're all going to fight each other, and then what? And then when you get to the drama, or the stage battle, where they're all trying to like fight each other in the consolation round, they're insular. They're not interacting with each other because they're all just talking with each other, with themselves, their own groups, about how they're going to overcome and like win, which is again just incredibly isolating. It's just them in a vacuum, right? Which again, like it kind of is giving us a chance to establish character development, but it's really not putting us in any sort of like, here is this character interacting with the world that we've built, right? And so, which again, it feels kind of empty, and it feels kind of just like, oh, okay, well, I don't really care about them yet, and I don't know why I would care about them yet. And again, that's going to be like the recurring theme of Road to Legend, is just we don't know these groups yet, and we have not been given ample opportunities to engage with these new groups yet. Alright, so we skip ahead. It's January 2023. All 4 of the new groups are in the consolation match, showdown, stage battle. I genuinely had to go back and read all the drama transcripts because I kind of forgot what happened, if I'm totally honest. And it turns out I didn't forget what happened, it's just I forgot they were from this particular album. So, we'll start with Visti, because they usually do. Visti is, they take a road trip together. They go back to some of these places that were significant to them in their existence as idols, in their career. They talk about kind of their moments of like great success and like kind of the high peaks of their experiences. And then they also talk about some of like, they go to this beach where they had this horrible showing. It was after Kay had left the group. Almost no one showed up, and then it rained, and it was just miserable. And they were thinking about how just sad and downtrodden they were. And with those kind of memories in their minds, they sort of all resolved to kind of keep going, because it would be really easy for them to quit being idols, but they all still want to be idols, and they all still really believe in the message that they have as idols that is like kind of creating this bit of like wonder and joy and magic for the listener, right? You can relax from your horrible, stressful career or, school or whatever, and have this moment where you can listen to these kind of lighthearted idols talking about, how much they care about you and how great you are and stuff. And it's this kind of like load off and how much that is important to them that they reach other people. And so together they all resolve to keep at it. You have Amp Rule. Dongha goes back home, talks to his dad. He has to face his dad and tell him that they lost their first stage battle, but that he's not giving up yet. He's going back to Japan because he's still going to fight it, because he has to show Ha-jun the power of the Yon family and the real heir to the Yon family. And, it's kind of recognized. He also, sorry, Dongha also in this moment is kind of recalling this interaction he had when he was like 7, and Ha-jun had come home briefly to talk to his father about something or another, and he encounters Dongha there, who is crying, I want to say, and he takes Dongha out to this market, and they kind of wander around together, and Dongha's like, gee, this guy is so nice. I wish he was my brother who's never here. Like, oh, and they kind of hang out for the day, and he gets Dongha a candy apple, and Dongha loves it, and he thinks it's great. And then later on, he finds out that is his older brother, and he's never going to see him again, basically. And so that's the memory we get, which is nice. It's nice to know that at one point, Ha-jun could be nice to people. But it is a sweet moment, and it's like a nice little insight into kind of like Dongha, who's this child who, honestly, for all the things that he's had and all the privilege he's had because of his like vast wealth and the family's political influence, he also is lacking in so many things. And so he's always kind of trying to make up for those things without knowing that he's trying to make up for those things. Inmates drama is also devastatingly sad. We get a little bit about how Rokuta is... Well, first off, Rokuta goes to hang out with Shiki and Ryu at Bar 7-4, because now they're all buddies. They hang out. It makes sense. And Rokuta kind of is playing the piano at the bar, and he kind of gets sad and starts telling Shiki about how he's having a really hard time because Kei is really nice and he likes Kei, but he doesn't know how to return the feelings that Kei has, because Kei obviously views Rokuta as his brother, but Rokuta does not have access to all the memories of being his brother, and so he's aware that this obviously devastates Kei, but he doesn't know what to do about it. Later on, though, Rokuta is playing the piano, and Kei sits down next to him and continues playing, and he says, hey, this song actually is supposed to be a duet, and we would play it together. And as he's playing, Rokuta actually starts to get the memories back of being Kei's brother, and he realizes that the reason he always felt like that song had been missing something, but he didn't know what, and so he'd keep playing it and playing it and playing it, but he couldn't find the missing element. And then he realized that the reason that it was missing was because Kei's part in that duet was the thing that he was missing, and that he remembers now that Kei is his brother. He still chooses to go by Rokuta for the generally, but this is kind of like a big moment in their relationship dynamic. So Rokuta's kind of starting to get these memories back, but also there's a moment where Rokuta has kind of a medical emergency, and he starts having it is implied he's having these kind of mental lapses where he's forgetting things. And so kind of Kei and Itsuki have this conversation about how Phantom Metal seems like it affects memory. And we do also have like the Cat's Whiskers short story in the Memory light novel actually alludes to this as well, in the sense that Tsubaki is forgetting things as she's dying in these kind of late stages of the metal erosion, and she's terrified to forget about Simon, and she's already even forgotten the name of Yohei, even though she like recognizes his face, she can't remember his name. And so that's actually one of the reasons that she asks Simon to pull the plug, so to speak, on her life support, because she is so selfishly terrified of forgetting the man that she loves so much. So with that kind of in mind, we have now a greater understanding of some of the effects of Phantom Metal. And it also, from like a meta perspective, makes sense that it would have something to do with memory, because it triggers these horrible memories when you use it, right? The memories of the most traumatic experiences of your life. So anyway, that's kind of their little bit that they have. And then finally, Goku Duck. Goku Duck's drama is about them remembering. Well, first off, like Yudo has like a crash. Sorry, Hansho has a crash out and like trashes this room that they're in because they lost like their first stage battle, and he's like mad about it and stuff. And then like there's a little flashback to Yudo's first day like as a prison guard, and how like no one really respects him, but he does care about like the guys, and he's trying to like treat the prisoners with respect. And then later on, it flashes kind of back to the present, and all the guys are like acknowledging Yudo, or sorry, they're acknowledging Hancho because he's in that state again, and so they're all like, "Yeah, you're like legit, and we trust you, we believe in you, and we feel the rage that you feel, and so we want to all rage together about like the system that we're in and how screwed up it is." And so they really all kind of have this moment where they bond together. And then, of course, Yudo like swips back, and then they're all disappointed. That's those are kind of the dramas, more or less. Now it's March of 2023. The Goku Luck has won the Constellation Round stage battle, and they will be progressing to the final. And now we get to the other rounds of this particular season that I feel like a conspiracy theorist when I start saying these things, but I feel I genuinely believe these things. I feel like the next two stage battles were an attempt by the writers to guide the fans in a direction narratively, and it did not work. And so there were these kind of very fascinating tidbits of lore that were kind of teased. But then because of the way the results of the stage battles, we were not able to further explore them. And again, I think this genuinely did lead to a lot of just general displeasure amongst the fans. A lot of fans felt very kind of shortchanged in this whole situation, and felt that these kind of fascinating story beats were kind of passed away because more popular groups won, but anyway, here so the next the next stage battle was between the Cat's Whiskers and Bay, and it kind of starts off with Anne stopping by Bar 74 to have a drink after they finish their shift at Candy, and they're sort of just chatting. And Anne is kind of talking about how they really respect the Cat's Whiskers for the kind of group that they are, and how they kind of stick to their aesthetic and their vibe. They're appreciative towards them, and they are interacting with Yohei in sort of a friendly way. And meanwhile, Ryu and Shiki are having this conversation, and during this interaction, Shiki pulls out his phone and starts showing Ryu this recording of Rokuta and Kei playing their piano duet together. And Shiki is really impressed. Obviously, he also has an interest in playing the piano. And as Ryu's listening, though, he is having some sort of reaction to hearing the music. And it's been established in this world already that there's something about the way that Kei composes that has kind of a cleansing effect on the people who listen to it. And that maybe it has something to do with, like, kind of destroying a little bit of that erosion or the effects of Phantom Metal, which I guess also, now that I'm thinking about it, probably has maybe a little bit to do with Rokuta also remembering that Kei is his brother after having played this song that Kei had composed for the two of them. And so this kind of narrative is explored again because Shiki is playing this little bit of the song for Ryu on the phone, and then Ryu kind of goes quiet, and then he starts having these like nightmares where he begins to remember that he's a human experiment. Also, by the way, in amidst all of these other things, Hajun and Alan are having an argument about printers versus digital, because Alan likes to print things out and Hajun just emails and does things paperless. I don't know. That's, for whatever reason, that's their through line through this entire drama. That's it. Anyway, they're all like in class or whatever, and then Simon's not there, and then Anne gets a call and is told that Ryu ran away, which is why Simon's not in class that day. And so they go to help out looking for Ryu. As it turns out, Ryu goes back to this facility where he had been held as a human experiment. And we find out later, like, he's basically panicked because he remembers being a human experiment, and he's afraid that what happened to the last person that had kind of like cared for him and looked after him, that being this particular researcher who had developed a bond with Ryu, he's afraid that Simon and Yohei and Shiki will come to an end and be murdered by maybe Ultra Trigger or the people surrounding Ultra Trigger, because that's what happened to this particular researcher who had helped Ryu escape from the facility. And, you know, Yohei, being the mother of the group, ultimately tells him, like, no, you idiot, we're going to look for you no matter what, and we're never going to, you know, let that happen. So they go and they rescue Ryu, essentially. Which, again, you know, so a lot of people were frustrated because, obviously, Bay, at this point in the series, you know, it's been a couple years, Bay is way more popular than the Cat's Whiskers. They're kind of more mainstream. They kind of appeal to that kind of general younger. They're appealing to a younger audience, or people who have more of that kind of pop and mainstream music sort of taste, whereas the Cat's Whiskers is a little bit more niche in the sense that they're more kind of committed to that lo-fi kind of old school vibe. They're kind of jazzy sound. And so that's not necessarily, they don't have the widest of appeal necessarily. And, you know, when they first interacted in the first season, one of the things that was nice about the first season is every unit lost and won a stage battle. But this would be kind of begin the drought of the Cat's Whiskers wins, because they do not win this battle. And I think a lot of people felt very frustrated because, you know, again, from a narrative perspective, Anne actually does a lot of interacting, with Yohei and the Cat's Whiskers in this particular drama. They're kind of having a back and forth rapport with Yohei as they're looking for Ryu. They're again having this conversation with Yohei when they go to get a cocktail, and then at the end of the stage battle, they come back and they're also having kind of a chat about their groups and their dynamics and other stuff like that. Meanwhile, Hajun and Alan are continuously having this like fight back and forth about doing things analog or digital. Analogically, digitally, I don't know. Either way, they're having this whole that's their like fight they're having the whole time. And so a lot of people felt like, okay, so on one hand you have Bay, who, like, Anne is really involved in this kind of investigative thing. They're really helping, they're really on the ground doing all the legwork and stuff. The boys are fighting, whatever. Meanwhile, the Cat's Whiskers are all looking for Ryu because he's a human experiment. He ran back to the facility that he was a part of. And also we find out that the guy who helped him escape that facility was murdered. He was shot. You know, so narratively, one of those things is kind of a little bit more engaging, right? But that didn't win out. Ultimately, Bay still won because they are the more popular group, and that's fine. It did frustrate people because a lot of people felt like, okay, well, one of those storylines I care a lot more about, and the other one is two guys who are arguing about a printer. You know, but that being said, moving forward, then you have the next stage drama, which is going to be the next stage battle that's going to be between Akan Yatsura and Cosmez, and that's going to be Trust. So, I don't make it a secret that I'm incredibly biased in the sense that Akan Yatsura is my favorite. And I remember the results of this being announced, and I was genuinely so, like, viscerally upset about it. And granted, I think some of it is that I am, I don't know if you might have perhaps guessed, I am in fact on the spectrum, and so sometimes when things that are like my deep special interest happen, or like things happen around them, I feel incredibly strongly and intensely about it. So, you know, there's that. But I did feel incredibly frustrated, just very like upset would be a good way to say it. just because, like, again, from like a narrative standpoint and also from a song narrative standpoint, I feel like it was frustrating that they lost. And I won't even say that it was frustrating that Cosmos won. It was just more frustrating to me anyway that they had lost. And so here, basically, the whole through line of Trust is that the boys from Akan Yatsura find out that Zen is going to meet up with somebody. And it is very funny because in the teaser, they think that like Zen might be like meeting up with someone for a date, which I find incredibly funny. Just because imagine meeting up with Zen for a date and he hits you with the like, yes, I cohabitate with another grown adult man who is my ride or die buddy who I left my cop career for, and we raised 3 boys together. I just think that'd be a really funny bit of lore to have dropped on a date. Like, where do you go from that? But anyway, so the boys think he's on a date, and they start following him. And as they start following him, they run into Nayuta, and Nayuta gets kind of unwittingly dragged along into their investigation of who Zen is going to meet. At the same time, Iori runs into Kanata, and after having this sort of interaction with fans, he takes Kanata with him to a cafe for pudding. And Kanata is frustrated because, like, he's been interacting with Nayuta now, like the real Nayuta. And to some extent, he feels like the real Nayuta is different. And it does kind of frustrate him because they kind of butt heads more. Very specifically, Kanata and Nayuta end up having an interview. And Kanata hates it, and he doesn't even want to entertain the whole situation, but Nayuta really does. And at the end, we do find out that it's because Nayuta wants people, even if it's kind of this pointless fluff piece, he still wants people to hear about them as Cosmos and to hear their music. And Iori has to tell him, hey, so, even though you're twins, you guys are still 2 different people, and Nayuta's going to have had thoughts and things that you didn't necessarily see him having, and so you wouldn't have known to make his illusion like that. So the illusion, your idealized form of Nayuta, was not the real Nayuta, and so you're just trying, like, you have to readjust yourself to remember that Nayuta is an independent human separate from yourself. And so you kind of, like, sometimes you're going to butt heads with people, even if you love them and care about them a lot. Like, there are going to be times that you're going to be mad or whatever, and that's fine. That's just what happens when you're close with someone. Meanwhile, the boys find Zen having a conversation with a police guy, or like an old man. They're shocked. I am not shocked that Zen is having a lunch date or whatever with an old man. That sounds on track for him. Anyway, so Zen reveals that he's been going around looking for more details or trying to dig up more details and information about what happened with Yudo after Zen left the Force. And at the heart of a lot of these feelings is this lingering sense of guilt that Zen still carries, that he or his leaving the Force might also have been the catalyst to put Yudo in this position where Hansho is such a pronounced feature of his life at this point. Where the boys kind of, again, reassure him that it's not his fault. The way that people react to you and what you do in your life is not really your fault. It's kind of the same way as being in a toxic relationship, right? And somebody always threatens, for example, harming themselves if you were to leave, right? It's not your fault, whatever they do after that. And as much as they want you to believe those kinds of things, that's not the case. And I think that's kind of, I'm not saying that that's what Yudo is saying or what that's trying to be painted here, but I feel like it's a very similar mindset that Zen is having where, oh my God, I left and this happened. It is my fault. And in all of this, he kind of reveals that he was sneaking around to do it because he didn't want to involve Iori and the boys in this kind of conversation, in this sort of situation, because it's something from his past and he doesn't want to trouble them with it. And so they end up having this whole conversation about how, the boys start going, hey, look, we're not kids anymore. We want to feel we're part of this. We're a family and we feel old enough now and mature enough now to stand with you and to face these hardships and dangers together as a family. And so Iori and Zen have to kind of relent a little bit and realize, you're right, you guys are getting older and you guys are more and more going to be in this sort of situation where there are these topics that we can talk with you about because you're not kids anymore. And so, with that being said, narratively, again, you have kind of this storyline where Zen is wrestling with, with his demons of his past, and he's trying to let go this sort of feeling that he has to handle it for himself because he doesn't want to trouble the others, where the others are saying, hey, it's okay for you to trouble us because we're your family. And even the song Leave It to Me is very like, we rely on each other and watch each other's backs because we're family, and that's what it's about, which does feel a little bit more aligned with the trust narrative, or like, the theme, which, to be fair, Kanata and Nayuta's arc does also involve trust, in the sense that Kanata also has to trust the fact that Nayuta is his own human, and he has to kind of learn to make peace with the fact that the Nayuta he's been hanging out with is not the real Nayuta, and that the real Nayuta is gonna sometimes, be different and want different things because he is his own separate entity from him. And it is probably kind of a weird adjustment to make after you've been doing that for a couple years, right? Like, so it makes sense. It is, narratively it does. Though I will say also, though, their song was called Trust Nobody. So I did feel like one of the songs was maybe more of a positive, like, hey, we should trust each other because we're a family. And the other one felt very like, we're only going to trust each other because we're family and nobody else. But yeah, so obviously, I'm biased. I do feel like they got robbed, but I also feel like, that Akan Yasuda got robbed in Vibes, even though Vibes was so heavily, Bay-centric. I just feel that Rowdy's was the superior song. Anyway, but that all being said, Cosmez won that battle. They went on. So now, instead of having maybe a final where you might have had an arc about a human experiment who is kind of fighting this battle of, am I a human or am I this weird, like, homunculus, I guess, like, Ryu trying to figure out how he fits into the whole grand scheme of things, and what's wrong with him, or why he's not X or Y or whatever, or without having this showdown of Zen versus Yudo again, or rather Zen versus Hancho in the final because Goku Luck is going to be there, we now have a final that is Bay, Cosmez, and Goku Luck. And I think, again, narratively, one of the problems that you encounter with this matchup is that none of them have any overlap with each other, actually. And so, as a result, when you get to Revolution, the final of this whole stage battle, it's narratively not the most interesting. Right? And I don't want to act like they were going to drop some crazy lore necessarily if the other teams had won, right? I think that is kind of we tend to think that or feel that way particularly, but like, it's not necessarily going to say like, oh, they would have just dropped all this lore and something. I just personally feel that there would have been at least a little bit more of a conversation to be had, perhaps specifically between like Akan Yatsura and Goku Luck in that final, had they had the opportunity to do that, especially because in the trust drama, it felt so heavy in like Zen's trauma focus. Let's talk about Zen's trauma in his past history with Yudo. That felt so like weighted, like, hey, we're really trying to push this going, hey, Goku Luck's going to be the final, and here we go. Zen's going to be up against Yudo. It's going to be a whole big thing. And then it didn't come to fruition. So again, you feel a little bit shortchanged, like, oh, okay. And, then you end this matchup and you go, oh, they have nothing to talk about between the three of them. So ultimately, all three of the groups had individual dramas that did not really overlap with each other, which, again, in a series that started in the first season with such a strong emphasis on these kind of interpersonal connections and the interplay of different groups upon each other and the dynamics and how they were kind of interacting with each other's lives and helping each other, or, having effects on each other and all this other impacts and character drama that came from that first season. This second season just felt so empty and listless because it really didn't go anywhere. And I think that's what really frustrated a lot of people because, again, the storytelling just felt very like, oh, we really were kind of banking on this happening and it didn't happen. And so now we spent this whole drama talking about this thing, And now we can't use this story beat later on. So now we have to come up with something else to talk about in the final. So Revolution comes out. It is the final round of the Road to Legend competition. All right. Cosmos and Bay are the two that have risen out of the stage battle rounds, and then Goku Luck is there because they made it through the consolation round and have jumped forward to the final. These three groups have nothing to talk about together. So there is a brief part of the drama where they're eating ramen together. Rather, the leaders are, and they're talking about the details of the competition heading forward, and that is pretty much it. All the rest of the dramas are separate and have nothing to do with each other. That being said, Baze is nice. We get a little bit of Anne development because, again, the previous seasons had been more focused on Ha-Jun and Alan, so now we're finally getting a little bit more of Anne's lore and background. Anne's mother is a narcissist, a parent who is in love with a concept of what their child could be, but not ultimately who Anne is. And so when Anne finds out that their mother is injured, they feel obligated to go and visit their mother in the hospital. And when they go, their mother is just a raging bitch. And she bad talks Anne, dead names Anne, bad talks their life choices, their friends, what they're up to, all this other stuff, how they're cross-dressing, blah, 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 blah. Just really nasty stuff. And also all the while saying, Anne, come back to me because I love you. You need to leave these people because I'm your mother and I know what's best for you. And I'm just like this because I'm trying to tell you what's best over, I'm trying to tell you these things because I know what's best for you. And without ever acknowledging or recognizing any of Anne's own individual will. And so finally, ultimately, Anne says, look, if I ever came back, I would fight you every single day. Alan and Ha-Jun both end up stepping in to go to bat for Anne, essentially saying, hey, you're a horrible, vapid woman. You're terrible. You don't understand your child at all. If you have nothing nice to say, just don't even say anything, basically. And so Anne leaves with Bae. It's nice. So it's good to see, again, Bae coming together, supporting each other, and really standing up to each other's pasts and toxic family situations, which is sort of the basis, I think, that their group is really set upon, the foundation, if you will. And it's also really nice, I think, that Anne talks about the complex feelings that they have for their mother because their mother is somebody that they love and admire to some extent, even though she is ultimately toxic and cannot return that affection or love in a way that is productive to both of them. It gives a little bit more context for Anne as a character and the sort of environment that they grew up in. And I think a lot of people can relate to having this sort of parent who, again, is in love with the concept of who their child is, but not necessarily with who their child is in actuality. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, especially like LGBTQ people, can relate to this sense of like, feeling like you have to present a certain way or act a certain way or, represent yourself a certain way in front of a parent who does not support you and might even be genuine in their, genuine in the sense that they genuinely believe that it will be best for you to do what they think is right or live in the way that they think is right for you. But ultimately, you have to kind of make this sort of decision and go, do I want to continue to please the people around me and live this way where I will constantly be at conflict with who I am, or do I just cut the cord and say, no, that's enough, I'm leaving, I'm going to be my own person? And so I think that is a very relatable struggle. Next is Cosmez. Cosmez is a lot about reflecting kind of on the interactions that Nayuta and Kanata have had and how Kanata is kind of coming to terms with the way that Nayuta is and what it's like again to be back with Nayuta. And specifically, he finds that Nayuta has actually been saving USB drives with all of their songs on them and all their tracks. And because Nayuta wants to preserve these memories, these kind of precious memories that he has with his brother. And I do wonder, too, if this has also something to do with kind of this phantom metal erosion. It is also kind of explicitly stated Naruto was also worried about what would happen had he died, and he wanted to leave things behind that Kanata could appreciate and that they have together. And so that was one of the reasons he started this kind of collection, and so that's kind of the general narrative is sort of this reaffirmation between Cosmez, the characters in Cosmez, of their kind of love and care and desire to be together and to continue to make music together. And finally is Goku Luck. And Goku Luck's I feel like Goku Luck's drama is a little bit all over the place. They go back to the prison and they're being talked to by the supervisor and the director who are overseeing the program. And the guys are just really rude to them. They talk about how Ryoga, not acknowledging that Ryoga has a speech impediment, but rather implying that he's too stupid to actually put words together. They talk about Shion. Wildly enough, one of them even makes a comment, essentially like, man, you would be really a good-looking guy if it weren't for how you are a scaly freak with a genetic problem, like, which is just a wild thing to say, but they're just, again, kind of associating how his disfigurement has left him in the dregs of society. He would have been a normal person, but his inherent flaw here has led him to be in the prison, obviously. They talk about how Kenta, if he stopped being, this rapper and degenerate hacker person, he's like a bright guy and he could have lived a normal life. And maybe if he really muscled down, he could still manage to be a productive member of society rather than the piece of crap that he currently is, etc., etc. And it really is kind of, again, driving home this concept where these guys are in prison not only necessarily because of, literally breaking the law, but also because they already were kind of predisposed to maybe being in a prison setting or being on the other side of the law because and have inherently who they are or their status in society and how they appear and things like that. And, like, I like the message and the concept behind the message. I just feel like it was done, like, really ham-fistedly. It felt very, like, we're telling you in, like, the most teenage movie bully way that these guys are bad guys and they look down on the members of Goku Luck for being the riffraff of society, and that's why they're in prison. It felt a little bit much. So this ultimately reaches a breaking point where, again, these guys are haranguing the members of Goku Luck. They are really speaking down to Yudo, who is doing his best to manage the situation. And, finally, they kind of show their hand and say that they're just doing this to try to create the image that they're rehabilitating prisoners and they give a shit about it. But they really don't. And they don't believe in any of that. They think these guys are exactly where they belong. And this really obviously upsets Yudo. But also, it pisses off Kenta because, again, they call out to him and try to appeal to his intelligence over these other guys, and so Kenta just dumps a water bottle over his head and tells him essentially to kick rocks, and this really does upset, obviously, the superintendent, the guys that they're talking to. And when the guy demands that Yudo get down on his hands and knees and beg for forgiveness for this whole situation, Yudo ultimately refuses and says, hey, look, you guys started this, and it's really screwed up that you don't even believe in rehabilitation when that's really what we should be doing here, because that's how we create a better society, etc., etc. And it's about that time when the phone rings and they find out that the men in authority find out that the prisoners are rioting because they heard about Goku Luck being there and they want to hear them rap before they go. And the director and superintendent are so freaked out because the prisoners could so easily overwhelm them that they agree to let Goku Luck perform because there's no way that they can manage this prison riot by themselves. And so then the prisoners go down and they perform for their fellow prisoners and again kind of reaffirm that they have come out of this sort of setting and they're going to prove to the world that they're worth something and they're not just, again, the riffraff of society. Bay wins. A lot of people at the time also felt like they sort of did this battle relatively close to Cosmez having won the Akan Yatsura battle, and so they kind of felt a little bit like Cosmos fans had been a little bit shortchanged on that one. But I also, at risk of sounding anti-Cosmos, I do understand to some extent that in the interest of having kind of, at least in some essence, the illusion of fairness, having Cosmos win 2 seasons in a row would have probably, to some extent, been a detriment to the growth of the series, because at some point, if one group only ever wins, it does eventually dissuade people from following, because if they want any of the other groups to win and only one group ever wins, it does frustrate people and leave them feeling like there's nothing they can do because, the Cosmos fans are too powerful or whatever, and they're going to just overrun the system. I'm just kind of repeating here what I've heard, what people have said. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I'm not trying to disparage Cosmos fans. They are as entitled to their favorites winning as any other group and their fans. I'm just saying, I think that from kind of a business standpoint, it makes sense that they might not want Cosmos to win again, because again, it does feel like then maybe a little bit repetitive, and then you just have Cosmos 2 wins, now what? I don't know. I feel like Bay winning was also kind of just, I don't know. I think a lot of people went, okay. Bay has a very large fan base as well. They're very well liked. Again, they have a very general appeal, or a wide appeal. I think a lot of people can listen to Bay songs and go, yeah, this is pop music. I like this. I jam with it or whatever. And it's got a nice message about, accepting who you are and who cares about what the haters think, be authentic and all that other stuff. Great. So they won. And I think that as a person who's like not necessarily a fan of any of, or like necessarily like a huge fan of any of those 3 particular groups, it was just kind of like, okay. Bay did also win in winning that particular season. They also won the right to have their own solo album, and so there is a Bay solo album that came out as a result. In conclusion, I think that the Road to Legend was just really poorly structured, and it was destined to fail. I said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. This was a horrible design. I don't know who came up with this. I don't know what the writers were on. I don't know who was making these decisions. It was a disaster. I think that literally, I really just feel like a lot of fans lost a lot of momentum during this particular season, because if you liked any of the new groups, none of them got anything really after the consolation match, except for Goku Luck. And then they got to the final, and then Goku Luck didn't even really have any interactions with the other 2 groups. They were kind of in their own little thing, just like the other 2 groups were. I think a lot of people who were fans of the Cat's Whiskers and Akane Yatsuda felt very, again, frustrated, because you have these kind of, teasings of lore that felt kind of more relevant to a larger narrative. For example, the narrative regarding human experimentation. This is kind of coming more into the sphere of consciousness for the world, because now we know a little bit more about Ultra Trigger and their child experiments. We have all this momentum, I guess, from the Akane Yatsuda side, where Zen and Yudo have beef to hash out, but they never get to. So that also feels a little bit frustrating as well. You feel a little bit kind of like, oh, okay, we got kind of blue-balled on that one particularly. And honestly, it didn't even get resolved in this most recent one. So hopefully maybe in season 4 we finally get a little bit of conclusion to all that lead up. And I think that really they kind of just, I felt like the writers sort of wrote themselves into a weird place where it was just kind of, I feel, again, back to my conspiracy theory, I feel like they were really trying to lead the battles in a certain direction. It did feel like with the songs and the narrative parts of the drama tracks, they were trying to kind of hook people and get them on board with certain things. And because it didn't turn out that way, and granted, I could be totally wrong. They could have totally seen this all the way through and they knew this was going to happen. I don't know. Maybe from the start they really wanted a Bay solo album. I couldn't say. I'm not at the boardroom in Avex / whatever the other one is, G-Crest. But it does feel to me that they had all of these story beat lead ups that they put into the will and the trust drama tracks, and then none of those story beats led anywhere because those teams did not win. And I think, again, that's where a lot of the kind of hostile attitudes towards other groups really got fostered, that kind of ended up being a little bit toxic in general in the fandom as a whole, because again, you end up then resenting these groups for winning, where it's really, again, not the fault of the fans or the groups for winning. It was more just that maybe the writing and the structuring was not there to support the story beats that they wanted to examine or to visit. So yeah, this is my summary. I granted, obviously, take any of this with a grain of salt. This is my personal opinion in a lot of these parts. I hope you feel like I have summarized these things for you well enough. I just feel like maybe talking in a microphone a little bit and just hashing out what I feel about these things, kind of explaining how we got from point A to point B, was a better way than just writing a script, because I think that just the process of writing the script and trying to kind of very carefully word these things was grating away at my like mental health, and that I just ultimately needed to say things so that I felt like I could get things done without the more tedious elements of writing a script. Let me know if you like this or not. I mean, if this is fine and people like this, I'm totally cool with kind of going a little bit more off the cuff and just saying things. But if people prefer more of a structured, here's me beat by beat explaining the situation or outlining the events of the drama CD, I can also go back to that. It's really great to be back. I love making videos, and I feel like lately I just have not had the mental like fortitude or capability to do and create things. It's just been such a slog lately, and I'm hoping that I can get a diagnosis for ADHD and maybe also find some treatment or some techniques that work for me, because there are so many things I want to get done and I just have not been able to sit down and do them. It has been incredibly frustrating and difficult, and I would love so much to get back to them. So thanks to all you heads who listened to this whole video. I know it was an hour and 20-something minutes of me ranting. I really appreciate anyone who came to listen and stuck around. I really hope that I can come back, because this is a creative endeavor I really enjoy, and I've now had a summer to recuperate after a long school year, just in time to get to another one. Yeah, so if you like the video, please like and subscribe, perhaps. Comment if there's something that I missed that's like major and you think you're shocked that I even forgot about it. Please comment it below, because that's also great, and I love having discussions about this topic. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about next, because there's actually a bunch of stuff that happened after this point, and I'm not exactly sure where to start. I guess I would probably start with the seasonal show, but let me know what you think in the comments below. So comment, like, subscribe. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Take care.